Iran has downplayed the significance of Friday's suspected Israeli airstrike, raising hopes of an end to the escalation between the two countries. It was seen as retaliation for last week's massive but largely ineffective Iranian missile and drone attack on Israel. Iranian officials say the strike hit a military base near the central city of Isfahan, describing it as a desperate attempt for Israel to save face. Pro-government protesters rallied in the capital with the familiar message.
Thousands of people on the streets of Tehran, making their message to Israel clear. They held signs and chanted "Death to Israel," hours after an alleged Israeli strike on Iranian soil. These pictures posted on social media show an undamaged military base in Isfahan after the attack. The area is a major centre of military production, with the country's most important nuclear enrichment facility located nearby. Iranian state media said there was no damage following the strikes.
Basically, in Iran, life is based on whatever happens normally. There's nothing whatsoever out of the ordinary.
Speaking at the G7 summit in Italy on Friday, US Secretary of State Antony Blinken made America's position clear.
What the G7 is focused on, and again it's reflected in our statement and in our conversation, is our work to de-escalate tensions.
German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock called for cool heads.
As the G7, we have decided here today to impose further sanctions and measures on the Iranian regime. At the same time, everything must be done to prevent an escalation with unforeseeable consequences for an entire region.
Israel's war cabinet has been debating its response to a large-scale Iranian attack last weekend. That came after Israel's presumed strike of an Iranian diplomatic compound. But it's hoped Friday morning's manoeuvres could be the last, after Tehran indicated it has no plans for retaliation.
Now, large explosions have hit the base of an Iraqi Shia militia south of Baghdad. Local medical sources say at least one person was killed. The base belongs to a coalition of Iran-linked groups called the Popular Mobilization Forces. The United States has denied involvement in the attack. For more on this, let's cross over to Ramat Gan in Israel, near Tel Aviv, where DW's Shani Rosanes is standing by. Hello, Shani. Nice to see you. Lots of questions surrounding these explosions near Baghdad. They are being called an airstrike, but the U.S. is saying it wasn't us. What's the conversation in Israel?
Well, not much, honestly. What we know is that there are some anonymous sources, Israeli officials, that are quoted saying it's also not Israel. But it's also typical. We would expect Israel to be denying that. Any action in Iraq would be somewhat of an uncharted territory, nothing that Israel would want to be admitting to do, especially not on such tense days. But that is for now, not much of discussions.
And what about the drone attack on Isfahan in Iran, which is widely being attributed to Israel? How is Israel reacting to that incident?
You know, it was quite tense 24 hours since the news of the attack came public and in Israel. And we've seen nothing coming from the government, of course, on purpose. Israel did not claim any responsibility, nor will it do it. But I think it's quite clear that the fingers point back at Jerusalem as a retaliation. There seems to be a lot of contempt by the Iranian response. We've seen the Iranian foreign minister, for example, completely denying Israeli involvement in that, saying that would not have been making any sense. So we've seen a lot of signs that the regime in Iran is trying to push away any framing of this as connected to Israel, which might need to put force on the regime to retaliate again. So it seems like we're heading to de-escalation, and we've seen a lot of signs of relief coming of Israel following that. But also, there's also at the back of the mind the fear in Israel that this might also be some sort of a trick, some sort of a decoy, a need for the Iranians to kind of keep Israel sleepy or off edge in order to maybe retaliate when they find the time. This is something we will have to deal with when it comes to Iran-Israeli relations from now on.
It's interesting what you say, especially when we use the word de-escalation from both sides. So let me get your sense of this. What do you make of how Israel is managing the threat of escalation with Iran and its proxies?
So we know that the attack, assuming it really was Israel, was sort of calming things down, showing that Israel has made its response, showing that, you know, an attack from Iranian soil on Israeli land will not come, you know, without any response. And also, this was a very targeted, strategically chosen facility that is very close to Iran's nuclear facilities, trying to signal, whoever did that, assumingly Israel, trying to signal if we wanted, we could have made it harsher. We could have gone all the way into attacking your nuclear program. But what we need to fundamentally remember is that something has been broken. A red line was crossed. The relations between Israel and Iran, you know, the shadow war that we've been seeing in the last decades, that has broken. And the two sides have stepped into a new territory of a spoken, very public conflict. And that means we're not quite sure where it's heading now. I think both sides are on their toes. We, of course, see the world very much attentive to this conflict, very careful of where it's going to lead both the parties, but the whole region. And for now, it seems like we're heading to de-escalation. But everybody in the back of their minds have this fear of knowing that the old rules of the games were broken and slowly new rules will be written. We will have to see how bloody and how aggressive they might end up being.
Right. Only time will tell. TW's Shani Rosanes, thank you.
Well, I spoke earlier to Ali Fathollah-Nejad. He's a political scientist and director of the Center for Middle East and Global Order here in Berlin. And I asked him, what did he think? Was Israel behind this attack in Iran?
Well, I mean, there is little probability that, those attacks were carried out by any other state. So there's a higher likelihood. And also we have some reports citing U.S. officials that are quite clear that Israel has been carrying out the strike.
There has been international worry that an Israeli retaliation for last weekend's attack would definitely escalate this conflict, and then the counter response coming from Iran would make it even more of a bigger crisis. But that hasn't happened. How do you explain this muted response on both sides?
Well, I think at this point in time, no one has an interest, to provoke an all-out war. This is certainly true for the Iranian side, given also the nature of last weekend's attack on Israel, the kinds of weapon systems that the Iranians have used, and also what has happened, today or last night is also, in my view, an indication that Israel did not choose a fashion of attack that could provoke Iran to further escalate. And what instead seems to have been the case, of course, by now we don't have any confirmation about the exact nature of the attack and also the targets and also the damages. But it seems that this was a demonstration of power from the Israeli side, a signal sent to Iran that Israel can cross Iranian defenses, perhaps at will. And this has been a demonstration of power from the Israeli side, signaling that if need be, Israel could easily target Iran in a forceful way, and especially, of course, Iranian military infrastructure.
The Iranian media have been reporting that drones were shot down near the Iranian city of Isfahan. What would make this city a target?
I mean, near Esfahan, there are a lot of military, complexes, but also nuclear facilities. But talking of the Iranian reaction, it's quite visible that the Iranians have no, appetite for escalation. They've been downplaying this attack to a quite ridiculous level. In terms of saying that, only 3 drones were, shot and were intercepted by the Iranian side. And from all we can gather so far, this attack has been, much more than that. But the Iranian side is trying to, keep it low, to downplay it, if not to belittle it. That is also not to have the pressure to respond. Which is again in contradiction to what the Iranian side, via the head of the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, had announced, just following the Iranian attack on Israel, as a new equation from the Iranian side, which would suggest that any attack from the Israeli side on Iranian assets would be met with a response from inside Iranian territory. So given the fact that this new equation doesn't seem to hold, this signals that those have been, warnings rather than a change of strategy. And the Iranian side is still very much worried that an all-out war could evolve out of those tensions. And in such a scenario, this would also be very much destabilizing for the regime in Iran.
Do you think the regime in Iran is realizing that maybe it's misread or miscalculated the position of other Gulf states, and that maybe they were counting on full support in a conflict against Israel, and that is obviously not what they're getting?
I don't think so, that this was part of the Iranian calculation that, they're going to be supported by the Arab Gulf states, against Israel. But the position of the Arab Gulf states is quite clear. They're very much interested, in bringing about a de-escalation, because stability for them is vital politically, but also economically. And so they fear any kind of escalation in the region, especially involving Iran. They've seen that Iran could be, very damaging to their to their economic viability, to the kinds of attacks that we've seen in the Persian Gulf region against the UAE, but also against the main oil facility of Saudi Arabia in September 2019. So, at least since then, they're extremely worried about destabilizing activities of Iran. Given their understanding of a relative reduction of U.S. support, they've chosen the way to seek accommodation with Iran. But currently, of course, they do whatever they can toward de-escalation.
Ali Fatollah Nejad, Director of the Center for Middle East and Global Order, we appreciate your time on this Friday evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
And for more, I want to bring in now Sabran Dhi, a historian who specializes in modern Iran at St. Andrews University. He joins us tonight from Edinburgh. It's good to have you with us. We saw in the last 24 hours what appears to have been a restrained airstrike by Israel and a equally restrained response by Iran. Is that a correct assessment? I mean, what do you think we're witnessing here?
Yes, I would think so. I mean, obviously, there's been no official confirmation by Israel of the strike. The Americans have also not confirmed it, the White House or Antony Blinken. But the Italian foreign minister, of all people, who is hosting the G7, did confirm that the Americans did tell them that it's an Israeli strike, and the Israeli and the American media are confirming it as well. So certainly it has been, I think, a low-key Israeli strike. It has been to the level that the Iranians, I think, are considering not to react and just let it simmer and sort of make this round of confrontation sort of calm down and move to the next stage.
And why do you think that is? Because the world this week has been sitting on pins and needles, wondering what kind of Israeli response we were going to see, but also just as worried about, a counter response coming from Tehran.
Well, I think, first of all, clearly there has been some negotiations behind the scenes that probably some countries have been mediating. Qatar, Oman, were traditional mediators in these cases between Iran and the West. Probably the United States have stepped in, and sort of an arrangement has been in one way or the other reached that there should be a mostly symbolic strike. I think the Israelis have chosen to strike around Isfahan because, of course, that's where some important nuclear facilities are, particularly Natanz. And they seem to have struck some radar stations, either connected to the military or some of the defense systems connected to Natanz. So they wanted to, more than actually inflict damage this time around, give the impression that they can strike that region in the future. And also Iran, when launching those missiles the previous week, wanted to give the impression or sort of prove that it is capable of hitting Israeli territory. So this is, I think, what the level of this is. It's mostly an exhibition of potential military prowess rather than actually the intention to cause damage. And we shouldn't forget that Isfahan, of course, is an important artistic city as well. So a strike on the city would have caused a lot of wrath amongst Iranian public opinion, irrespective of their opinions towards the Islamic Republic.
Last night, just before this attack allegedly took place, the Iranian foreign minister gave an interview in the United States and said that if there were to be any type of retaliation, any type of attack by Israel, the response by Iran would be at a maximum level. Now, he was asked to explain that, and he just repeated the word maximum level. How do you interpret that?
Well, we shouldn't forget that the Israelis are not actually admitting or taking ownership of what has happened. So clearly this gives some leeway for the Iranians to sort of state that that pledge remains valid as long as the strike is significant and the Israelis are actually sort of acknowledging that it was them. Mm-hmm. And then obviously Iran wants to make the point that what we saw last week was just an opening salvo, and they have better and more precise missiles that they can hit Israel with. I mean, we don't know whether this is the case, but probably that's what Amir Abdullahian wanted to state. However, as I said, the nature of this Israeli strike makes it possible also for Iran to keep that threat on the fire, if you want, but not actually execute it at this stage.
And before I let you go, the fact that we had the Iranian foreign minister, using this fierce rhetoric, talking about a maximum response, and just hours later, the actual response by Tehran was rather muted. Is this a case that within the regime, one hand doesn't know what the other hand is doing or saying?
Well, I would say that it's also a very unprecedented situation for Iran. I mean, the conflict with Israel is a very long-standing one. Obviously, it has been at lower intensity. It has had this flare-up with the Damascus attack, and we shouldn't forget it's not over yet. This chapter might be over with these strikes, but it's still simmering there in the background. So Iran is really making policy as it goes along. This is a completely unprecedented situation, and they are grappling with the kind of reaction, and the rhetorical reaction has been very strong, as we've seen from Iran all along. But again, I think that the nature of the Israeli strike, now that it has actually happened, could actually persuade Iran to step back and avoid, obviously, this issue from overshadowing what's going on in Gaza. And of course, they portray themselves as supporters of the Palestinian cause, so they won't want that to happen.
Okay. Savos Ranjmardemi from the St. Andrews University, we appreciate you taking the time to talk with us on this Friday night. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.